Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Decarbonizing Ports and Maritime with Hydrogen and Ammonia. It's a great honor to see you here today. I'm the host, Cheryl Yu, research analyst from Leader Associates. Let me first give you a brief overview of how we interact in our meeting room. Please feel free to use our Q&A function to ask our guest speakers questions, and for any technical problems, leave your message in the chat box. Our topic is set to be linked to investing in green hydrogen 2022, a leading global platform that unites the full hydrogen value chain. It will be held on September 15th and 16th this year in Singapore. Well, Singapore has always been a very important transit hub in global trade. Such advantages allow Singapore to be a step ahead in establishing a global network in the hydrogen sector as well. As I said, hydrogen is a global game, so every different types of player can find their roles here. In order to play such a large-scale game, a stable supply chain is a guarantee for it. The importance of ports in the coastal industry cannot be overlooked. Today, we invite a representative from the Port of Amsterdam to chat about their achievements, challenges, as well as inspirations for the Asia-Pacific region. And the topic of energy transition is always closely related to the public sector. So Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore could share its planning and policy support to decarbonization. Then Mitsui OSK Lines, as a shipping company with operation in Asia and globally, has a lot to say on the topic of green fuel transportation. Finally, is our very practical discussion on whether the APAC region is ready for a stable supply chain, including the infrastructure, logistic management, regulation, and so on. And this session will be presented by MPA, APM Terminals, Yara International, AP Moller-Maersk, and DNV. Well, also, I am very delighted to have 3 female guests on this topic today, showing us the power of women in the energy and port-related sectors. Well, first, let's welcome Ms. Ellen Vandervelde, Senior Strategic Advisor, Energy Transition from Port of Amsterdam.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, for having me and introducing me. I'm going to share my screen because I've prepared some slides to take you through well, some of the activities that we are deploying at the Port of Amsterdam to build up a green hydrogen import chain. So let me see if this is working properly. Can you see my screen well, Cheryl?
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much. And again, once again, thanks a lot for having me. It's an honor to share some of our insights on setting up the import-export value chain for green hydrogen in Amsterdam. And what I would like to do is just take you through some of the drivers for us to set it up and what we are trying to do in that field. Just first a little bit on the Port of Amsterdam. We are the 4th biggest port in Northwestern Europe. A lot of liquid bulk going through our port, a serious transshipment going through, and also, as you will see later in my chat as well, also a very important region, a very important port for the greater Amsterdam region. We have a lot of jobs related to the port activities that we have within the authority, all the companies and all the companies around it. And as you can see, let me see if I can have a pointer. It's probably easier. As you can see here, this is actually actually the part of the real port of Amsterdam. This is our land, so to say. But if we speak about energy transition, as you can imagine, this is not something that you're doing local. So we usually consider the whole North Sea Canal areas or a whole connection with the sea as the region where we try to deploy the energy transition and try to set up a value chain for green hydrogen use in that region as well. And as I will just show in a minute from now, you'll understand why. So a very important port region for the region and also, of course, for all our transport corridors into Europe. We are part of 3 TNT corridors, so really having our veins into the European mainland and playing a very important role there as well. If we then look at why are we as a port well, really thinking that the hydrogen and the use of hydrogen is a vital product to decarbonize our region is actually because we have 3 major well, functions in the region that are, let's say, hard to abate. So they're hard to electrify. And that's also where we are looking for hydrogen as a fuel to really decarbonize those sectors. The first one is we have a very large steel plant here, just close to the sea within the Eimond region, Tata Steel. They are seriously looking at decarbonizing their core process by moving over to direct iron reduction to produce green steel. So this is actually the biggest potential demand center in the region that we see for the use of hydrogen. Well, another important one I just already mentioned is the port area itself. We have a lot of activities in the port, and we're also trying to set up new activities in the port that will require hydrogen to decarbonize their processes, and also as a feedstock. So we are setting up a significant sustainable fuel production cluster within our port region that will definitely need hydrogen as a feedstock. And one of the reasons why we are setting up this fuel hub is also to produce sustainable jet fuels, because we have Schiphol, very large airport, a 4th largest airport of Europe. We have just in our backyard, so to say, and we have a direct connection by pipeline from the port area to Schiphol. So the development of sustainable jet fuels is also a very important reason to get hydrogen into the region. But of course, as I already mentioned, it's not only the region that is important, but also transshipment, because we are really a corridor to the mainland of Europe. For example, to connect to the Ruhr area, so the very large industrial cluster within Germany. Well, I mentioned those 3. If you here see really the current fossil fuel uses per year, that's quite significant. And if you look at the lower bar, you also see that to what extent these sectors are already decarbonized. And that's just really not a lot. So there's a lot of work to do, and we will need a lot of green hydrogen for that. And if, as you will see, this will grow already quite rapidly. So we already expect the first significant step in hydrogen demand growth in 2028. This is when Tata Steel will get their first DRI oven in place and start using it. And there will be another significant step, probably around 2035, where they will start up a second one. But also here, you see that there's still another, let's say, 200 kilotons of hydrogen for the port area as a feedstock to fuel high temperature processes expected. Again, this is only for the region itself, North Sea Canal area. You'll probably know the numbers for the European mainland. If you look at studies, demand will grow significantly. I mean, of course, there is debate on how big it will get, but we know that for the hard to abate sectors such as industry and heavy duty transport, we're gonna need a lot of hydrogen. And again, that transshipment function is very important to us as well. So then why import? In this figure, you can see that there is quite a bit of plans for the Netherlands to produce green hydrogen locally. This is really in the order of, let's say, up to 1 gigawatt at max. And as you can imagine with the numbers that I just showed, this is by far not enough to cover the demand in the region only, but of course also in the hinterland, it's going to be way more that is needed to really get it going. And that's why we really focus on international imports. And as you can see, by 2035, for example, we are already trying to cover at least the local demand with 250 kilotons per year from imports, and this will grow probably way higher to transship to the hinterland, as I just explained. So what are we looking at for import? Of course, there's a big debate on how will green hydrogen get to certain areas, what carriers, hydrogen carriers do we expect to happen. And here in the lower right figure, you can see, well, the distribution the way we expect it, more or less. So we really think that there will be a mix of hydrogen carriers coming our way, partly just really high purity liquid hydrogen, partly hydrogen connected to liquid organic hydrogen carriers. These volumes are very high, they seem very high, but that has to do with the fact that to really store hydrogen in an LOHC, there's a ratio of about like 1 to 9 of hydrogen versus product. So these are the product volumes, but you have to divide this by 9 to really get the hydrogen content. So that's why these are very high. But that's, for us, it's okay because we have a lot of storage potential terminals, storage terminals, transshipment terminals to be able to cover that liquid bulk, because we see a downward line in, of course, the oil and oil-based products there. And also synthetic methane is one of the potential carriers that we see coming there. Just for a bit of a feeling, like how does it compare? So currently the number of fossil fuels that is going through Amsterdam is 45 million tons. So just to give you a bit of a feeling on how that resembles. So if you add this all up, then this is going to be significantly higher than what we now have for fossil throughput. And here on the left, you see what we think are the most interesting regions. This is, of course, not something that we came up ourselves. There's a lot of work going on, like what are the interesting supply regions for hydrogen. And we are really having the chats all over the world to see what could work there. So that's really something that is on the spot right now. So one more on hydrogen carriers. One very important one is we hear a lot, of course, on the import of hydrogen through green ammonia. It's also a topic of this webinar. We are very honest, at this point in time, ammonia is not on top of our list as a hydrogen carrier to put throughput through Amsterdam. And that has really to do with the fact that the Amsterdam region is very densely populated, and really the city of Amsterdam is growing into the port because we have to build a lot of new houses as well in the Netherlands to make sure that everybody has a good place to live. And we foresee that with ammonia, the safety risks, well, are a challenge, so to say. We're not excluding it, but it's a challenge to really get it implemented in the region. And also because at this point in time within the greater Amsterdam area, ammonia is not a product that is not, it's not used a lot within the sectors at this moment. That's why it's not on our list. And we are currently focusing on the top 3. So liquid hydrogen, LOHCs, but also the dry hydrogen carriers. So it's more like the small chunks that you flush with water and then you release hydrogen. So that are the 3 main hydrogen carriers that we are working on to see if we can get them through Amsterdam. So how do we want to build up the hydrogen value chains, it's probably quite obvious. So we currently really are in the phase of setting up Kickstart projects. Some of the technologies also on the hydrogen carriers are quite new. So we really want to set up pilot projects to demonstrate that the technology can work, that we can set up the change in small scale and then start to build up from there. And really, as a Port of Amsterdam, we also try to really take a facilitating role in that, really try to accelerate the development of those value chains. Because we hear a lot of chicken and egg problems usually in supply and demand, and we really as a port try to accelerate that comes together, and we can really start building the change and setting up the market. So how do we do that? Usually we do that by really supporting and accelerating a lot of different projects, and actually along the whole value chain. So it's not only on import, it's also on production. We're part of some of the electrolyzer developments in the region by supporting the setup, for example, of a synthetic kerosene plant, setting up the heavy-duty fueling stations, and of course also an import. And what we try to do with import, we do that usually under one umbrella that we call H2A. Which really focuses on shaping a safe, efficient, and reliable end-to-end hydrogen value chain in Amsterdam, but also through Amsterdam. And the ambition really is to import about 1 million tons of hydrogen in and through the Port of Amsterdam by 2030. So, of course, it's never enough to really cover the demand, but I think that really taking that step to setting that up by 2030 is already quite ambitious. Because there's honestly nothing there at this moment in time if it comes to green hydrogen. And we do this through different types of projects. Currently we have 4 running. I cannot share the details of those yet, but the idea is really to set up specific value chains, try to make them work through those pilot projects that I just shared with you, and then really connecting, because I think that's the real challenge, connecting an end user that really says, I want your green hydrogen, to a supplier at some point in the world, and trying to connect the dots in between. And that's already a challenge. All of you that are working on that will probably resonate that feeling, but it's also very exciting to see that we are really starting to set something up there. And then just one last one that I wanted to share with you, because you probably say, okay, well, that's fantastic. And then your hydrogen is in Amsterdam, and then what? Well, we are, of course, very good in transshipping over water. And so that's one thing that we are focusing on. But one very important one is also the development of a hydrogen pipeline system in the northwestern part of Europe. So currently in the Netherlands, our local, the state-owned pipeline operator is currently developing a national hydrogen backbone, which is also going to be connected to Amsterdam, as you can see in the figure. So we will get a connection to either the steel factory as well as the port region. And this will also be, for us, a very important way to distribute hydrogen from our port to the rest of the Netherlands and the rest of Northwestern Europe. So we are really, through different modalities, a gateway to the European mainland. And that is something that we really try to get together, make it work, and see how far we get. And I think I'm gonna leave it to that for now.
Well, thank you, Ellen. Thanks for sharing. And here we have one question from George. What is the biggest roadblock influencing the hydrogen facility growth in Amsterdam before 2028?
Can you just repeat it one more time, because I lost you in the first few words, Cheryl, sorry.
I said, what is the main roadblock to influencing the green hydrogen facility growth in Amsterdam before 2028?
Yes, I see. Well, there are, of course, different challenges. I think one that we see, and I hope that we can also spend a bit of time on that during the panel later today, is one critical path that we see is if we also want to decarbonize the ships that are bringing the hydrogen here. We see that usually if we discuss setting up the value chain development of really the green shipping not based on ammonia, that's a challenge. I wouldn't say it's a roadblock because we are working very hard on it, and I know that all the companies are working very hard on it. But I think if we look at the timing of 2028, that is a challenge that we need to tackle together.
And the second question from Sebastian, well, regarding LOHC, there are many different molecules, well, can be considered. So do you consider all of them, all these technology in your study, or are you have any focus or preference?
No, at this point, it's an open question. We really try to take into account all of them and see which one suits best. But our expectation, that's also what I try to highlight during my presentation, is that we expect that there will be a mix of different carriers, so also a mix of different LOHCs that may come our way.
And Simon also asks where the H2 pipeline connect to the Schiphol airport as well.
No, that's a good one. So far, no. But since the hydrogen backbone will connect to the port area and we have a direct connection by pipeline to Schiphol, well, it might be logical in case that Schiphol really will need hydrogen in gaseous phase or maybe in liquid phase, we will try to facilitate that in the port and make sure that it will get there.
Okay, thank you. And we'll have specific Q&A sessions in the end. So more questions, we will left them in the end. And then is our next part. Well, okay, we have the great pleasure to welcome Mr. Yihan, Director of Innovation, Technology and Talent Development Division from the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore. Let's welcome Yihan.
Thanks, Cheryl. Give me a few minutes as I load up my slide as well.
Okay.
Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, it's clear.
All right, great. Good morning, afternoon or evening, everyone. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore, or MPA in short, to this webinar. So I'm pleased to join you and speak on MPA's initiatives relating to maritime decarbonization. So this is a quick overview of my presentation. It will cover 4 main segments. Okay, I will start off with an overview of Maritime Singapore. So this is a snapshot of the ecosystem here in Singapore. Many of you here would be familiar with some of the key performance and statistics. So I just wanted to highlight a few things. So Singapore is host to more than 170 international shipping groups and 5,000 maritime establishments. The Singapore Registry of Ships is the 5th largest ship registry in the world. They are our commercial and technology demand drivers. So within our port, at any point in time, you can find around 1,000 vessels in our port. And most of the vessels are here for cargo operations or port marine services, including bunkering. And this has positioned Singapore favorably to be the top bunkering port in the world. And this also allows us to play a key role to support the global shipping community in this maritime energy transition. So as a maritime hub and nation, Maritime Singapore strives to become a global hub port and a leading international maritime center. So as you can see from the slide, in the latest edition of the Leading Maritime Cities of the World 2022, published by Menon Economics and DNV, Singapore is ranked top for the 5th consecutive time. And for the first time, Singapore is also recognized and ranked top in the maritime technology pillar. So we are very happy, and this is also testament to our commitment and investments into digitalization, decarbonization, as well as on innovation. So I also want to take this opportunity to thank all partners for your contributions and support towards these efforts in building and growing Maritime Singapore. So earlier this year, MPA released the Maritime Singapore Decarbonization Blueprint 2050. The blueprint takes on board the recommendations made by the International Advisory Panel on Maritime Decarbonization and inputs from public and industry consultations. This charts our ambition and long-term strategies to build a sustainable Maritime Singapore. The blueprint outlines 7 areas that Singapore will focus on to support the industry to decarbonize. Under the blueprint, we have set concrete goals and targets to reduce the emissions from our port terminals and domestic harbour craft in 2030 and 2050. We will support a multi-fuel transition and supply low and zero carbon maritime fuels and enable green technologies to be used by the industry. Green ships on the Singapore Registry of Ships will also be recognized and incentivized. In this journey itself, it's important for cross-sector collaborations across the energy and shipping value chain. This is key. We will work with the International Maritime Organization and also like-minded international platforms to develop and establish standards. It is also important to support and encourage the development, uptake, and commercialization of green fuels and technologies. To that, MPA and our research partners will intensify our investments and efforts in maritime decarbonization R&D, working closely with the industry and global stakeholders. Last but not least, we also want to build up industry capabilities in carbon accounting and green financing. And all in all, to develop the outcomes under the blueprint, MPA will commit an additional 300 million Singapore dollars to support this decarbonization initiatives over the next 10 years. So I'll just dive into a few of these focus areas. So for Singapore's cargo terminals operated by PSA and Jurong Port, we seek to reduce absolute emissions by more than 60% from 2005 levels by 2030. By 2050, we seek to have our cargo terminals to achieve net zero emissions. The transition will be enabled through the adoption of cleaner energy, including the use of solar energy, liquid natural gas, as well as the electrification of our port terminal equipments. Green hydrogen will also be an important energy source to further decarbonize terminals. Beyond the use of cleaner energy, our operators will also adopt digitalization and automation to optimize operations and reduce their carbon footprint. So there are some 1,600 hovercrafts operating in the waters of Singapore today. This supports the activities of the port. So this is the second focus area of our blueprint. While cargo and port activities will continue to grow into the future, it is important for us to reduce the carbon footprint of our domestic fleet to meet Singapore's green and decarbonization goals. So for the domestic hovercraft fleet, we aim to reduce absolute emissions from the domestic fleet by 15% from 2021 levels through a combination of electrification and clean fuels such as biofuels and LNG. By 2050, it is targeted for the fleet to halve its 2030 level emissions using electrification and net zero fuels. So to do this, MPA has been working with the industry consortiums and research institutes to trial, develop and deploy full electric hovercrafts, as well as conducted studies on the use of blended biofuels on board the existing fleet. So as the top global bunkering hub, MPA is also preparing for a multi-fuel transition to support international shipping. So we see hydrogen and hydrogen carriers such as methanol and ammonia as important marine fuels in the maritime energy transition. So as such, MPA has participated in several green shipping consortiums such as the Castor Initiative, the Itochu Consortium, as well as the Sabre Consortium, looking into ammonia as a fuel. We are also facilitating green or e-methanol initiatives for shipping. So this complements our existing efforts in LNG bunkering, which has allowed shipping to reduce their carbon emissions immediately. In addition to LNG, as mentioned earlier in my presentation, we are also currently supporting the use of biofuels in our port. this can be expanded to cover bio-LNG as well as biomethanol in the future. Beyond moving to cleaner fuels, which is the single most impactful way to reduce emissions, MPA is also working with the industry to develop shipboard carbon capture technologies, optimize ship performance using technologies such as air lubrication, weather routing, for example. And also we are looking to enhance ship port interfaces, leveraging on digitalization. So this could include the likes of just-in-time port calls and just-in-time port operations. This slide illustrates the maritime fuel ecosystem maturity for some of the low or zero carbon fuels, and also the readiness of green technologies such as shipboard carbon capture, storage, and utilization. So the maturity and readiness of a marine fuel depends on a multitude of factors, ranging from supply availability and infrastructure, technology readiness of the electrolyzer, be it fuel cell or combustion engine, and this is shaped by regulations, standards, and policies, and more importantly, also a factor of market demand. So it's important for the industry and authorities to work closely together in this journey to enable these options. So I'll go briefly into how, similar to what Ellen shared in her presentation on the Port of Amsterdam's work and focus, similarly in Singapore, MPA has adopted a value chain approach, a value chain ecosystem to support the industry to research, develop, pilot, and deploy green technologies and fuels through joint industry projects. So this ecosystem approach brings together not just the ship owner, operator, but also the fuel supplier, and together the shipyard, engine manufacturer, classification societies, fuel trader, port authorities, just to name a few of these value chain players. So we have supported 3 industry consortium which are awarded under the MPA and Singapore Maritime Institute grant call to electrify our harbour crafts. So this has involved some 30 companies and research partners across the 3 consortiums. We are also heartened to see other industry consortium, such as the Coastal Sustainability Alliance, formed with similar diversity of partners to accelerate such a development. Similarly, the hydrogen-based fuel consortium that I mentioned earlier, from the likes of Castor, Itochu, and Sabre, also have a rich and diverse ecosystem partners, which has enabled them to move their ideas from ambition to reality. And this covers partners not just based in Singapore, but globally. This is just a snapshot in terms of some of the joint industry projects that has been undertaken in Singapore. It covers multi-stakeholders, as well as it is looking into the different fuel solutions as well. So as I mentioned earlier, MPA is very glad to support and facilitate the activities of green shipping consortiums in Singapore. So we see this as an effective way to establish green fuel supply chain through Singapore, bring together demand users, fuel suppliers, and technology providers. So the pathway to decarbonization is not straightforward. Hence, MPA has actually worked with our partners in this journey since the early 2010s. We have established the Center of Excellence in Maritime Energy and Sustainable Development in the Nanyang Technological University to deepen our R&D capabilities in this area and develop green solutions for the industry. Last year, MPA, together with 6 companies, established the Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization, or GCMD in short. So MPA, together with the private sector partners, have provided a total of 155 million Singapore dollars to support projects to help the industry eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. GCMD will be an instrumental partner to industry consortiums seeking to pursue R&D and conduct pilot trials in Singapore. So we welcome industry consortiums to reach out to us to pursue development and piloting of future marine fuels as well as technologies. So this is my last slide. This is basically a visual in terms of how we see a snapshot of the green technology ecosystem in Singapore. And I would also like to take this opportunity to invite every one of you here to reach out to us, our partners, for collaborations as you embark on your decarbonization journey. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Iha, for sharing. And here's one question from me. Well, you mentioned that Singapore was the world's #1 port, and I would like to know how you position, well, Singapore in the hydrogen sector, how you maintain this advantage as the world #1 in the hydrogen sector. And what's your advantages compared to other ports in Asia region?
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl, for your question. Yeah, so in terms of hydrogen itself, I think we see hydrogen as one of the many different fuel that will be suitable for the maritime industry here in Singapore. We take hydrogen carriers such as ammonia and methanol as a set of complementary solutions or fuel sources that will be important for the industry. In terms of our advantages and strength, I would say that it goes back to, at the end of the day, the ecosystem that we have in Singapore. We do have a lot of ship owners, operators, and managers here in Singapore, and there are a lot of ships calling into the port for operations and also for bunkering. So this will actually create a very good base demand for the different fuel types. And with a good supply base, we also hope that this can allow economies of scale. This will help to create more virtuous cycle of reducing costs and enabling to create a higher volume that can be done through Singapore. And Singapore being in geographically advantageous position amongst the key trading routes, I will also say that we are also ideal in terms of serving as distribution hub for renewable energy sources of clean fuel that could move from the region, be it from the Middle East, from the Southeast Asia region, as well as Australia, up for distribution through Singapore.
Oh, thank you. And could you please introduce some specific initiatives about hydrogen or ammonia?
So in terms of the institutions that look at this, I would say that there are quite a few. The centers are basically research entities within our universities, the likes of the National University of Singapore and the Nanyang Technological University. As I mentioned in my presentation earlier, there is the Maritime Energy and Sustainable Development Center of Excellence, which is a key partner that we work with on maritime decarbonization. They do look at hydrogen and ammonia as marine fuel for research and deployment. Of course, we also have the Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization, which looks at piloting and trials of high technology readiness and commercial ready solutions for the industry.
Okay, and here's the question from other audience. For hydrogen, what's the timeline for import terminal and any support from the government or key hurdles like infrastructure?
Okay, this is a tough one. I guess it is also similar to Alan. I think we are really assessing, how the developments are phasing out and developing. Today, as you can see, this is also the reason why MPA is closely involved in working with the industry through the consortium project to understand the transition time frame and the industry demand and supply availability. I would say that for hydrogen itself, we are also exploring a combination of what is the suitable medium, to bring in hydrogen or its carriers into Singapore and ensuring that there is sufficient infrastructure in this space. I hope, in the later part of this decade, we should see the start of some of this hydrogen-based fuel to come into Singapore for use as a marine fuel.
Okay, thank you, Ihan. Thank you for the answer. And well, then let's welcome Mr. Ajay Singh, Managing Executive Officer from Mitsui OSK Lines.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, for for my turn to speak and that introduction. I'm Ajay Singh, Managing Executive Officer of Mitsui OSK Lines, and I also am Managing Director of Global Energy Development, which is my own venture for developing green hydrogen in particular. I'd like to start by referring to an excellent question early on in the discussion from George Curry, I think, which was what's the biggest hurdle or bottleneck to having early supplies of hydrogen? And one simple answer, in my opinion, is cost. Any form of hydrogen that's produced today is much more expensive than the currently available fuels. And I simply use that hydrogen as an example of a clean fuel, whatever variety, whether it's green hydrogen from electrolysis or blue hydrogen from natural gas using carbon capture and storage, or indeed any other form of combustible, completely clean energy. These forms are far more expensive than currently available hydrocarbon fuels. So that's the single biggest challenge. And we can't look at the challenge of abating CO2 in isolation to what's happening to the global economy. The reality is that most of the population on the planet is living at standards of living which are far lower than what's desirable. And secondly, the state of geopolitics and the global economy is such that multilateral dialogue, finding common solutions to our common problems, cooperation, this is all coming under a huge amount of stress with all the conflict that exists. So you can't do things which are going to stress and completely bring to a halt the global economy. The solutions have to be pragmatic. So for MOL, the number one word as far as clean energies are concerned is pragmatism. And that doesn't mean that we do nothing. It means simply that we try to do what is possible today as fast as possible, and we keep working on getting realistic solutions in place as soon as we can. So that's really the single point principle that guides all our actions. I had said at the outset that I wouldn't actually share any slides, but I've changed my mind. And perhaps if you allow me, I'd like to share my screen very briefly to show what MOL is doing in this area. Highlight, first of all, what I mean by the pragmatic solutions. This is our plan, essentially, as a company to address decarbonization. First of all, we'd like to make sure we deploy at least one net zero emission ocean-going vessel during this decade. And we are quite confident of being able to meet that goal. We've already developed vessels along with our partners for coastal deployment, electric battery tankers, for instance. Doing that for ocean-going vessels is more challenging, but we are confident of being able to deploy this using fuels such as ammonia, for instance, during this decade. Secondly, this is the most important point around pragmatism, is to use the cleaner fuels that are available today to try and transition a very large proportion of our fleet. So we would like to expand the use of liquefied natural gas as a marine fuel as fast as we can across the range of vessels which we own and operate. And here we hope that maybe we can have just short of maybe 100 vessels on LNG by the end of this decade. So that's the major transition. Now, burning LNG automatically reduces your carbon emissions by maybe a quarter. So that's significant, and that's something which can be done here and now. So we are promoting the use of LNG quite aggressively. And in the meantime, we keep working on solutions to try and achieve our slightly longer term goals, which are to achieve a 45% reduction in our emissions intensity by 2035. And then we go to the full 50%, the net zero in due course. So this in summary is our goal. What we are doing towards a longer term goal, we are backing a number of initiatives. We are ourselves implementing a number of initiatives. For instance, we are trying to reduce fuel consumption on board vessels by going back to a very old technology, which is using wind for propulsion. So the picture on the bottom left shows our Wind Challenger design. We feel we can get reductions of up to 5% in fuel consumption, which is of course extremely, it's certainly worth doing. And this can be done today. So we are talking to our customers to build new vessels, conventionally powered, but reducing fuel consumption using this technology. We also try and combine this at an experimental level with things like onboard hydrogen production, using the vessel's motion to produce electricity, carry out electrolysis, and produce hydrogen, which can be used to augment combustible fuel supply, again reducing carbon emissions, and also when the vessel is in port, to reduce the drawdown of fossil fuel-based electricity to run the vessel's utilities when the main engines are off by using this hydrogen. So these types of ideas are being trialed. I'd also mentioned the electric coastal tanker. So the second picture from the left is the E5 coastal vessel, which is being developed. We already have prototypes and being successfully pursued. And then there's a range of other initiatives, including for us investment in clean energy technologies outside of shipping, such as green hydrogen and other areas. So in brief, that's what we are trying to do in MOL. I'd like to just turn to a couple of other points around this pragmatism theme. The first point I'd like to recognize is that clean fuels will not be produced only for ports and the maritime sector, quite obviously. They will be developed for the economy as a whole. So the point is to actively participate in this. We can't solve the problem just as a shipping industry. Now, how do you get to the cost reduction? That's the real essence of the whole strategy. In my view, the most important thing is to focus on projects which are located in regions which have the highest probability of achieving cost reduction quickly. So just to take the example of green hydrogen, areas of the world where you have growing demand and where renewable power costs are already in the right benchmark, those are the regions perhaps which are going to be the highest probability areas. And secondly, where those regions coincide with places where you can produce and use the fuel locally to begin with, that's perhaps the most promising route to develop clean fuels cost competitively. So places like the Middle East, India, China, parts of Southern Europe, these are places, and within these, I would say India, for instance, is a country with very high growth rates of energy demand and also very economically priced renewable power. It's a logical place to start developing green hydrogen projects. You don't have to transport them anywhere. You can produce them locally and you can utilize them locally. And it also serves a whole range of national objectives, including air quality improvement, including the reduction of foreign trade deficits. More than half of India's foreign trade deficit is only because of imports of crude oil and natural gas. And in a country where oil demand is actually growing at 3 to 4% per year, and natural gas demand could grow much faster, obviously it's a huge economic incentive to produce fuel indigenously. Now, if you produce the fuel indigenously, what you do is develop the scale needed to bring down the cost of electrolyzers. To produce green hydrogen and therefore green ammonia at a cost which is competitive with hydrocarbon fuels, we need electrolysis at something like $200 per kilowatt in terms of capacity. If you talk to electrolyzer manufacturers today, you will get estimates, even if you're willing to do very large scale projects in 5 to 7 years' time, you will get estimates in the region of maybe $500 per kilowatt. But what we need is around 200 to 300. So you can see the challenge in cost reduction that has to be achieved. And the best way to do that is to focus on large markets which are growing aggressively and utilize the fuel locally so that we can minimize or eliminate the cost of transportation and handling. That's perhaps the best way. And then utilize the cost reduction you've achieved to apply that to other places, such as Europe or Japan, and then develop the fuel supply locally. The challenge with marine fuels is that they will have to be transported to a number of locations around the world. So you can imagine if you produce, say, green or blue hydrogen in the Middle East, you then have to convert it into liquid hydrogen or into ammonia. So that's additional processing cost. You then have the cost of shipping, and you have the cost of handling and reconversion to a usable fuel in some cases at the receiving end. All this adds up the cost. And therefore, I think it's not really pragmatic to expect that we are going to have, competitively priced fuel very rapidly all over the world. Just to give you some idea of the scale, ammonia, for instance, today it's about a 200 million ton per year industry, out of which about 10% is traded internationally, about 20 million tons a year. If we want to convert the entire maritime fuel requirement of 250 million tons a year, that's clearly not practical to expect today's ammonia industry to achieve that. And all of that ammonia today is dirty ammonia, by the way. There's huge amounts of carbon emission associated with it. So the key point, once again, is let's start with what's possible today, and let's work on intelligently on selecting those investments where we can achieve rapid cost reduction of fuels, and then extend that into an international supply network where fuels like ammonia or hydrogen or methanol or whatever we think is the best choice can work. So that's what I'd like to say. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Well, thank you, Ajay. Ready for the questions? Okay, my first question is, what's your opinion about the presentation from Ellen and Yihan? Do you have any questions for them?
No, not really. I mean, other than to say that it's really great to see, the initiatives that are being taken in Amsterdam and Singapore. Both are absolutely, leading ports in the world. And we need more such initiatives to really promote. I think the vision that shows in terms of the scale of opportunities and combining together the different applications, I think that's really commendable.
Okay, so as a global shipping operator, could you make some comparisons between different ports or terminals, since I think you have many experience dealing with these issues?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's as a shipping company, we go wherever the ports are and wherever our vessels need to go to serve our customers. Scale and concentration of vessels are obviously a key factor. So I think the industry recognizes that points like Singapore or in the Middle East, where you have transits of large volumes of shipping, these are the logical locations to develop bunkering for both LNG and then in due course, things like clean hydrogen and clean ammonia. So what's missing from the panel, of course, at the moment is the Middle East, but clearly I think there's a lot of potential there for marine fuel development, clean fuel development.
So speaking of supporting decarbonization, how do you consider the market or the port in Japan and Singapore?
I think they're two very different places, locations. Singapore is a very high volume of international traffic passing through between the Indian and the Pacific Oceans. Japan is more of a destination, obviously. But Japanese companies, given the scale of shipping as well as large ports like Yokohama, we are also doing quite a lot in terms of LNG bunkering in other areas. Japan has invested very early on in technologies like hydrogen. I think now overtaken by China in terms of things like a number of refueling stations for hydrogen, just to take one example, but otherwise the largest number of hydrogen refueling stations in the world. So Japanese companies have technology, they have capital, and clearly there's a great deal of support from the government now to try and accelerate that decarbonization. We also have the greatest need as an economy because renewable power costs in Japan are quite high. And it's an imperative for Japanese industry to access clean fuels comparatively priced as soon as possible.
Okay, then it's a question from Angela. How is MOR planning to mitigate the safety risks associated with ammonia as marine fuel?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. And there are safety risks associated with ammonia. So obviously, as we all know, ammonia has been transported as a cargo at sea for a long time, and there's a whole set of safety regimes around it. But using it as a fuel in the engine room, where you have human beings in close confines thousands of miles away from help, that's a different picture altogether. Technically, we think it can be done, but the issue is developing the whole host of procedures and safety regulations around it, which can then be applied confidently across the industry. So that's where we are concentrating. The engine manufacturers, they have designs, and these are going to be available commercially quite soon. I like to apply some of my experience from the oil and gas industry, where we handle large volumes of poisonous gases like hydrogen sulfide. If you go to some of the major oil fields in Central Asia, Kashagan in Kazakhstan, for example, you get very high volumes of hydrogen sulfide production. That's a lethal gas. Inhalation of that gas in parts per millions of concentrations is fatal. But the field produces very large volumes of that gas. It is compressed and re-injected into the oil field to accelerate the production of oil, and then the oil is taken as the commercial product. The compressor rooms for that gas are completely isolated. They are unmanned, and very large scale compressors, and they operate. So some of that experience can be applied to the maritime industry. The technologies exist, but they're two very different scenarios. Onshore you have access to help. Offshore it's a different picture. There's a combination of increasing amounts of automation in the engine rooms, so that will help. But short answer to the question is yes, there's a good deal of safety risk, and we are working on trying to mitigate it and develop the procedures around it.
And there's one question from Charles. Do you foresee nuclear playing a part in decarbonization of maritime industry?
It could play a role, potentially, yes. We ourselves are not pursuing it very actively, because although there are technologies which claim to solve the problem of radioactive waste, nevertheless, that remains a risk. So we haven't really, identified that as a very high probability source at the moment, but we are aware that work is ongoing in that space.
Okay, thank you, Ajay. And that's all for our solo presentation today. Then let's move our enthusiastic discussions now. So how to maximize the synergies between different sectors? We'll start our panel discussion. Well, first, a big thank you to all of our panelists, and please turn on your camera and voice. I'll be handing over the live room to our panel moderator, Alan, and looking forward to your share.
Thanks a lot, Cheryl, and really happy to start this panel after these presentations. I think that they already set the scene quite well for this panel. But before we dive into all the questions, I actually also want to give all the panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves. But not only on who they are and what function they have, but also giving them the first question to give a hint on actually what is the key question, I think, in this webinar, which is what is key in driving forward the APAC hydrogen supply chain readiness. And to start with that, I actually want to start with Johan, who already gave a presentation. So I think, Johan, we know you a bit, but I'm very curious to hear your first hint on the key question for this webinar.
All right, thanks, Alan. Regarding your question, right, what is key in this APAC hydrogen supply chain readiness transition? I would say that there are many multiple factors that we need to consider. I think some of these are also mentioned in the presentation and also during our discussions. One, of course, is really the supply availability of the hydrogen fuel. I think what is also important is also to look at what the readiness and the accessibility of the technology surrounding the electrolyzer, be in terms of fuel cell or combustion engines. What is also critical will also be on the demand side and the pricing. What is the green premium that enables this demand to be generated? and whether the likes of the offsets, carbon credits would be important, as part of this part to support the hydrogen supply chain demand to be picked up in this region. And the last 2 points I have in mind immediately will be really on the angle of what the authorities typically look at. So this goes back into the conducive policies, regulations, and safety standards that need to be put in place in order to give clarity to the industry as we move into this space. And I guess also a part that has not been really mentioned actively in the discussion so far is really about the necessary training and workforce reskilling, upskilling part, which is important in order for the industry to move into this space. Yeah, so I think I don't have a single answer. I just wanted to be a bit greedy, and these are some of the factors that I can think of.
Yes, so if I hear it well, it's a lot of work to do, but you're positive. Very good. Very
Definitely
good.
Positive.
Thanks, yeah, thanks. Then I would like to move forward to our next panel member. Ms. Sakura Kuma, could you please introduce yourself and also share your first thoughts on the key question for this webinar?
Sure, thank you, Ellen. My name is Sakura Kuma. I'm the CEO of APM Terminals Japan. In the previous session, Ajay mentioned Yokohama port. Actually, this is Yokohama is where I am. This port has the deepest draft, and APMT Japan is the biggest, deepest, and most advanced terminal in this area. And we offer all full services for the container vessels. And the services we serve covered all around the globe. And in terms of the LNG bunkering, Yokohama port is the first port in Japan to start the endeavors. And I was very happy in my previous capacity. I was part of that project as well. I joined this company last year. February 2021, still new, but I'm in this industry for more than 2 decades. Still very passionate about it. And to your key question, well, the key factor, actually, it's hard to choose one, but if I must, I would say collaboration. Because challenges also at the same time is opportunity, but depending on how you see it from which angle, right? Since it's an opportunity and a challenge as well, it cannot be fulfilled by only one party. And it is very obvious, even from the same industry, we need to unite it from different sectors. And not only this industry, but all the supply chain. And if you would like to look into it, we also need to involve the government proactively. So collaboration is the key that I would like to bring to this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sakura. And I think we will get back to that later during the panel. So very interested to hear your thoughts and other thoughts as well. Let me go to the next panelist. So we've seen the presentation from Mr. Singh from MOL. We also have Maersk in the room. Nicholas, could you please introduce yourself and give your first hints?
Yes, thank you, Ellen. My name is Nicholas Franslay. I'm the Asia Pacific Growth Lead based out of Singapore. My main responsibility is really conceptualizing the business and growth strategy within the Asia Pacific, as well inclusive of implementation. And by growth is involved both inorganic and organic growth throughout the Asia Pacific region across our ocean as well as logistic and services portfolio. Now going into the first key question here, I see, this is following up from Sakura Kuma's point on collaboration. Now there are multiple stakeholders involved here, and I think most importantly will be the customers. As a maritime player, you always try to see things from the customer's perspective. And the way Maersk have been seeing the trend is that our customers, let's say using an example of the Fortune 400 companies, at this point in time, about 30% of them have set global emission target. Some of them are more ambitious. Some of them have become extremely ambitious to the point where their ambition is to reach net zero emission by 2040 or 2050. Now, there's clearly a demand from the customer perspective on green solutions, green maritime solutions in the market. And that's indeed that means the demand side is somewhat covered, at least in the medium term. Therefore, now is the key issue that we need to answer is on the supply side, which is the collaboration with the maritime players, port players, as well as governments. So that's on the stakeholder perspective. I think quite promisingly is in terms of tech readiness. Now, aside from electrolyzer, green renewable energy technology that's become increasingly more mature, we see the cost curve continuously being lower, translating to more cost competitive green fuels. We also see things from the vessel technology as well. I think at this point in time, green methanol vessels are already in the market, and potentially green ammonia powered vessels will be ready somewhere at end of the year. And of course, some optimization will happen, but I think at this point in time, it seems that the maritime vessels themselves are really ready to accommodate green fuels. So that will enable the transition towards green energy. And lastly, I would say this is quite unique to APA, or in general, APAC, or in general, interregional, whereby I think maybe this is not something that a lot of people know, or probably it is in the case that green fuels, green ammonia, green methanol, in terms of energy density, is half of bunker fuel, the one that we use today. Now, the most obvious implication would be that bunkering frequency have to be double of that. And that's indeed the case where Asia Pacific can indeed play is geographically, it makes a lot of sense, because intra-regional trade in Asia Pacific is already about 60% of Asia's trade. And if anything, it's going to continue to increase as Asia can grow as a consumer market. Therefore, from a bunkering frequency perspective, that's something geographically Asia Pacific can accommodate. Now we already identified several major ports here in Singapore, in Yokohama, and potentially somewhere in Shanghai, and one somewhere around New Zealand or Australia. Therefore, geographically, it makes a lot of sense. And indeed, this can be really a region as a whole where bunkering for green fuels is economically viable, that is not disruptive to the entire maritime route. I see it a very promising region.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Then I'd like to give the word to Natalie to introduce herself and give the first ideas from your side. Natalie, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the speakers who spoke earlier. It was all very interesting. So from my point of view, I have a ports background, shipping background, but maybe what I will do is I give a bit of a perspective on a producer side. I represent Yara Clean Ammonia, and we take an integrated approach to the market. We are producers of ammonia and clean ammonia, and specifically going forward. We are the largest shipper of ammonia, so essentially we have a trade and shipping unit which trades and ships the molecule around the world. And we also have storage terminals around the world. And we are right now, and that is the part of the team that I am working in, looking at the downstream dimension of ammonia, namely bunkering ammonia in the context of clean ammonia as a shipping fuel, and also other end user segments that are emerging in the context of the energy transition. And the key point that I wanted to make with respect to Ellen's question is that from our point of view, or at least from my point of view, the key constraint for companies like Yara to move forward on investing both on the upstream side, so namely producing the clean fuel, and also on the downstream side, namely investing in the bunkering solutions for this clean fuel, the key and essential constraint is lack of certainty on demand. This, to me, is the fundamental one, and this is a constraint for upstream and downstream. We are speaking to the market, and in my mind, what the key driver that will fundamentally unlock this will be the price gap. And the reason why I'm saying this is that we know there are other dimensions to this. There's regulation, There's the safety dimension that Ellen raised earlier. There's the technology dimension, and Yara has over 100 years experience. It's been producing ammonia since the 1920s. And in fact, it's been producing clean ammonia since the 1920s. And this only changed in 1993 when they shifted to natural gas because of the gas was cheaper at that point in time. So we don't see the safety dimension as a showstopper. However, so that said, there are other constraints, for example, the lack of availability of the engines. That is one of the key things that is keeping us in difficulty to move forward with discussions with ship owners. But I feel that a lot of these will be unlocked the minute the price gap will reduce. That will in turn provide the incentives to the technology manufacturers to move forward on the engines. It will provide the incentives for the ports as well to move forward on developing the regulations, and it will push a lot of other private sector operators, as well as governments and regulators who are looking at the market and their developments, to move forward on putting in place everything that is required for the development of the grounds that will allow bunkering of clean ammonia, including the fuel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And I think you raised, so you summarized some of the things that already were mentioned in the discussion very well. So thanks a lot for that. But really, before we go into the discussion, I'd like to give Imran the opportunity to introduce himself and also give your perspective on the key driver for the APAC value chain. Imran, go ahead.
Good afternoon and good day to everyone. My name is Imran. I'm the Head of Research and Development for Maritime Advisory, DND, for Southeast Asia, Pacific, and India. We are overlooking both digitalization and decarbonization initiatives here in Maritime. And I'm actually currently managing a project on ammonia bunkering safety in Singapore. And I see at least 2 participants in the panel here who's in the group. Who's also within the consortium, Yara team, as well as MOL. So happy to have familiar faces at least within the consortium. I think whatever has been mentioned has already covered the question here. What is key? Maybe I just emphasize again what Ihan initially mentioned. There isn't one key here in driving forward any alternative fuel chain readiness. I do agree price is fundamentally the factor, but pricing, of course, is a function of, again, safety, fuel availability, infrastructure requirements, some of these factors to determine readiness. I think one thing I could mention is that we have recently published our energy transition outlook on the hydrogen forecast to 2050, and we see 5% of hydrogen being used in 2050. So this was just released on the 14th of June. So I'm happy to speak a little bit more on the project that I'm managing on ammonia bunkering safety. But yeah, over to you first, perhaps, Alan.
Thanks a lot, Imran. And maybe also to start with the first question for you as well on the clean shipping fuel. So I think Nicholas already gave a nice hint on. So one of the things is we know that a lot of new clean fuels will come our way. I think they were all of the ones I know were mentioned before during the presentations. I think Nicholas already gave a hint on, for example, for the bunkering frequency, on what the implications could be of these new fuels. Do you foresee any other implications for the value chain when we move to these new type of fuels for shipping?
Yeah, I think in the project that I'm handling, safety is the top consideration here. And I'm just recalling back what perhaps Natalie mentioned, with Yara handling ammonia already within the 1920s, already within from 1920s. I guess handling ammonia as a refrigerant or even as a fertilizer is a totally different, will be different from handling ammonia as a fuel for bunkering purposes. And going back to what Nicholas mentioned, right, in terms of the frequencies of bunkering, these alternative fuels, most of them compared to the traditional marine oil will be bunkered more. So this input here will determine the safety profile of, for example, the toxic gas dispersions, the contours that will be resultant from the increased bunkering frequencies. All this would have will have an effect to that. So these are just some of the I would say inputs to the safety considerations. Building the bunkering concept here is key. To what level? What are the throughputs? For example, what are the flow rates that we are looking at? How big perhaps will be the manifold, and then the resultant QRAs that will be in effect with regards to those numbers will again determine the safety contours and basically the safety profile of the bunkering concept. So we have to put all of this in the picture when we're discussing the use of the alternative fuels within the maritime.
Thanks a lot, Imran. Natalie, I could see you nod a lot. I'm just curious. So you told us that you have a port background, and actually, I think it's a very unique position that Yara is in, where you cover well almost the full value chain with your portfolio. So maybe to bring that question one step further. So I just asked Imran the implication for the value chain. Do you foresee what kind of implications for this new way of clean shipping and bunkering? What will it mean for the port areas in your view?
It's a good question. So ports are in a tricky position. So I would kind of club the port world into different types of strategies vis-a-vis these new fuels. You have, and someone mentioned this earlier in the discussion, ports that are, oh, actually you mentioned it in the discussion, ports that are adjacent and almost inextricably linked to the urban area, so cities. That is a different type of setup and considerations compared to a port that does not have that. So I would club that already into two separate categories. And of course, the former will need to have much more time, will require more time and more effort into looking at to the feasibility of this. That said, we in Yara have pursued studies looking at this specifically, but of course, we are developing the market for ammonia. So this will need to be done independently of producers to look exactly what the requirements are. But then beyond that, it's about this commercial strategy of the port, because the port doesn't necessarily have to look at this from the opportunity of bunkering, but you mainly pointed it out. They are basically the interface between the hinterland and the sea. So here we have opportunities around importing ammonia and then cracking it into hydrogen. So basically ammonia as a hydrogen carrier. We have opportunities around storage and therefore looking at what end user segments are emerging for ammonia or hydrogen. We have also opportunities around upstream, opportunities around producing ammonia and whether this is happening in the context of or adjacent to the ports and therefore what links and opportunities are there. If that commercial strategy develops, then that's a whole different ball game for the point of view of the port, namely either the landlord or indeed the operator. On a bunkering, from the bunkering point of view, again, we have two different type of considerations. One is doing this completely off the land. So essentially at anchorage, ship to ship, bunker barge, so essentially keeping it away. Of course, the regulations need to be in place and the port needs to be on top of that, but essentially from an investment point of view, it's offshore, off the land. Then we have other type of bunkering solutions that will require that on land investments and considerations. So really what I'm trying to say is that there's definitely not one fit for all, and each port will need to understand what is it that they want to achieve in the context of this transition. A lot of ports have plans for their own operations, but there are opportunities beyond that that they need to explore. A lot of ports are still not there yet. Some are very forward-looking, and Yara is speaking to those ports. We are also speaking to other ports that I see do not have a vision around this. And so it is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out in the overall context of the market. And my true concern really is the fact that some ports might lose out if they don't start looking at this carefully now, because everything that we are doing now will not actually have concrete outcomes for at least a couple of years. That's how long it takes to build a bunker barge. That's how long it takes to bring a bunkering solution. That is why we are pushing now.
Thanks a lot, Natalie. Jan, may I invite you to respond to that? So how do you look at that from an MPA perspective? What implications does it have going to clean shipping fuels?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I guess to add on to the inputs from the other panelists, I would see that what would be a pressing issue or pressing concern on our side would be really from the angle of ensuring that the infrastructure support is there. Infrastructure support comes in the area of being sufficient and also in time from the this is especially important because we are looking at a multi-fuel transition. So that means more tank storage requirement will have to come in place. I think earlier on, Nicholas also mentioned about the energy density, expecting higher volume of bunkering that will take place. So that this will probably also add on to a higher pressure in terms of accessing and having enough suitable infrastructure to enable this transition and flow of new cleaner fuels. Yeah, so I just wanted to add on that point.
Thanks a lot, Jan. Speaking of infrastructure, so we've been talking about clean shipping, but of course one of the key elements of the value chain are the storage of clean fuels, hydrogen, whatever you can name it, to enable the decarbonization of all different sectors. So maybe Sakura, could I ask you? It's actually a similar question. So what do you see for your terminals? How does it change the whole new path to decarbonization?
Thanks. So when we were talking about LNG bunkering, that was 3 or 4 years ago. That was a trend as an interim solution that immediately possible at that time. For the industry, but then we understand the MOL has a more ambitious goal than that we can use LNG to solve that problems. So the industry right now is moving very, very fast. I think Natalie pointed out that the pricing and the demand, the conflicts also comes from the hesitation of the industry, because the biggest challenge for I do not want to address it as a biggest challenge because we have too many biggest challenges. But one of it is we see multiple options here, but there is no single solution that the industry can concentrate on and work on. Today, the title was the hydrogen, but we also know different users are considering different options. For example, Maersk is actually ordering the vessels fueled by the green methanol. And in the presentation that Ajay show us, there's also wind power in the discussions, and not to mention solar power as a long-lasting options, but none of them technically mature enough, or this in a supply-wise have a sufficient supply to the whole industry. And the other panelists also mentioned, because this is very depending on a geographic differences. If you can produce the certain kind of green fuel, then that might be easier for you to make sense of the pricing. And if you have a lot of need in the local wise, then you can also solve some problem of the demand. So I guess if we have a single solution right now, which we don't, if we did, then the things could be much easier than, you know, every sectors, every parties will just put their all energies and resource to tackle that challenges. But now, because we do not have that, so in terms of the terminal, yes, no matter which type of the fuel, we need to have an investment of a certain kind of infrastructures, either both the storage and the bunkering facilities. And all those requires a significant amount of investment, also the land. And as some already developed terminals like Amsterdam and Yokohama, if you want to figure out that land from nowhere, then that's another issues, right? Because every piece of land is basically occupied. Either you reclaim some new lands, but yes, where there is a problem, there are going to be solutions. But then the problem right now is we are losing, we don't have the focus. We don't have to really focus. If it's just one problem, everybody can tackle together. And come back to my comment in the beginning, why collaboration is so important yet so challenging is because we have so much to do, but where to focus is still a question to ask. There's no answer for that. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Sakura. And also thanks for I think a very nice bridge to probably well, one of the more difficult questions. So you indeed highlighted in the beginning that collaboration is really key to make it work. And I think what is very unique in this panel is that we have representatives from both the public and the private sector within one panel. So what I would find very interesting to hear, and it's actually an open question to all of you, is so what should that collaboration between the public and the private sector look like to really get that hydrogen value chain going? Is there anyone that wants to comment on that?
I can take first and then hand it over to other panelists. Like many panelists also mentioned, putting the safety issues, demand issues, pricing issue aside, and the technology issue aside, all you know, this is a once in a 100-year time transformations. So industry solo or any enterprise solo cannot solve these problems. The government need to be more proactively coming out to show the ownership. And I think a lot of government is doing that. The thing is, the knowledge belongs to the industry. Government might not necessarily have that knowledge where to go. There is a vague goal that's right now every government is aware of that, but how to get there has to be suggested by the industry. So you might use a language of lobbying, or if you have some negative image of that, where we can just avoid that. So anyhow, the communications. Maybe it's arrogant to say education, but all in all, we need to input. We need to do the very constructive input to our governments. Again, we don't have a single solution is another challenge, but we work on, if we can narrow down this solutions, then the powerful support from the government is really necessary, not only in terms of the aid, but also in terms of the regulations, because we want to do it safely, we want to do it properly, and how to make the rules effective rules, not the rule to bind us, to stop us from moving forward, but to help us, to help the whole industry, to help the whole supply chain, to build up the win-win relationship going forward. So that would be a very key concern from my point of view. Now hand it over to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Sakura. So maybe Nicholas, could I invite you to reflect a bit on this as well? Do you resonate the things that Sakura just mentioned, or do you have another view on it?
I resonate with that at a high level, but I'll frame my points in aside from just private and public collaboration. There's also the private and private, and Natalie has provided a good overview at the start. Right? As a maritime player, it's one of the key role that we can play here is providing that off-taking. Because from my understanding in project experience is that when there's no off-take, it's remarkably difficult to get the capital to begin with. And that's always a key roadblock when it comes to large investment project development. So that's one key thing. Private and private collaboration has to be closer. And I think practically what it looks like is for all private typically large private entities to articulate their vision in terms of what they want to play with, where they want to move forward in terms of decarbonization, what kind of fuel selection that they have in mind. And from there, it's much easier when that communication is articulated clearly to the market, that players such as Yara know exactly which player to engage for potential collaboration. And I think fundamentally is that private entities as well have to take a bit more risk. I think the problem with this green transition is cost is still high. The technology pathway is still unclear where exactly it's going to go. Therefore, everyone really need to start dip their toes in the water in that sense to really start playing around in it in order to technology and the market wise to develop. So there's a private to private collaboration. A private to public. This gets a bit tricky because what I've based on what I've seen when trying to develop the green fuel supply pipeline for Maersk was that, and in general, the bunkering infrastructure is inadequate to just have one collaboration with a single port. Because at the end of it is a global supply chain. Just because, for instance, Port of Amsterdam is remarkably developed, there's always a question, where am I going to bunker with green fuel somewhere in Asia Pacific, which is currently non-existent. Therefore, I think it has to be taken into a higher level where aside from a port or even a specific government collaboration, governments themselves acknowledge this issue and utilize more inter-countries existing platform. I think in Asia, fortunately, we have the ASEAN platform to create that infrastructure moving forward. In Europe, you have EU, really a very strong panel to really drive forward decarbonization. It's probably way ahead everyone at this point in time. So something along that line that creates a clarity in terms of the standard that private entities can know exactly what am I getting myself into, what will be the cost structure moving forward by utilizing the existing regulation, subsidy, tax grants, etc. So I would say that is the most important clarity at a regional level at the least. Hopefully it will be global, something as equivalent to IMO.
Thanks a lot, Nicholas. And I think we've just heard two very nice call to actions to the government, but also maybe to the port authorities, just like us, Ihan. So I'm just also curious. It's a thing that we think a lot in Port of Amsterdam as well, but do you think that the role of port authorities will change in the energy transition, in your view?
Yeah, definitely. I think as part of this energy transition, I think we do see changes in priorities and changes in focus in our role. So I would say today, the port authorities typically, are seen as regulators. We look at, how we enforce standards on quality and quality of the fuel. We work on planning on the port. So this goes into the infrastructure piece. And we also, to a certain extent, give industry certain guidance on our national policy relating to the requirements on the growth of the industry and the sector. Moving forward, especially in this energy transition part, there will be a need for the authorities to also move beyond just as a regulator into someone who is more facilitative, more enabling. So this is, I think, what we mentioned about in our presentations as well. How do we enable and support innovations and solutions to take place? Some of this will have to be piloted or trialed before adoption can take place. I think we must set certain degree of experimentation to allow small scale to take place, share our learnings and experience so that the industry collectively can move forward effectively. The other part is also, as port authorities, I would like to see that we can play this neutral role, to bring in the different diverse stakeholders from the different part of the value chain together to talk and explore and address all these complex issues, uncertainties, and also challenges. So this could be commercial in nature, or it could be technical in nature. That's why, and that's where we want to bring in research institutions, the universities to come into Khartoum to help look at safety studies, technical studies, procedures that will help to address commercial and industry concerns and interests. And then I would just also want to add that beyond that, especially on the enabling part, this has to go into other aspects of work which will have to then cover into new technological solutions that will complement the use of new fuel. We also have to look at the financing piece. Green financing can be more effective to help the industry take up some of these solutions, not just at asset level, but potentially in other fronts as well. And I also mentioned earlier, because it's part of my job as well, to really preempt the workforce, to look at how the workforce can be upskilled and reskilled, to address some of these challenges. I just wanted to go back to the earlier point about the collaboration part. How do we look at the public-private kind of collaboration? I just wanted to add that such collaborations are also very important to serve as pathfinders on what are the solutions available or most suitable for specific trades or activities. I think there's no silver bullet as what the discussion has shown. I think we probably need a multitude of different solution space to experiment and trial. I would say that this public-private partnership need not be restricted to a geographical region. It could be something along the line of a G2G2B, whereby the ports of, say, Port of Amsterdam, Port of Singapore, work closely with the industry partners to form key bunkering networks. So that some of this clean fuel shipping can take place effectively. After all, no solutions can be effective if it is just implemented in one single location. So I think there is good opportunity and synergy at the private and public level to work together with multiple parties, multiple port authorities to enable that. Yeah. So I just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Thanks, Jan. Thanks. Cheryl, I'm just going to shortly check in with you whether we have a very hard stop at 15 past, or I can go a few minutes over, because I see there are a few questions, but I also want to give the panelists the floor to share their takeaways, and we only have like a few minutes left. So can I take a few minutes extra, or do we have a hard stop at 15 over? A little bit over 5 minutes.
Well, it's
okay.
Very flexible since our room is very hot, so I think it's better to go on.
Perfect. Then I'll take a few minutes extra. Thanks, Cheryl. Then I just want to share some of the questions that were posed in the Q&A. So there's one, so we've been discussing pricing, and Scott Goldie asked the question, do you expect that cleaner fuels will set a premium, which actually means, so do you think that customers will pay more, or would be willing to pay that premium for clean fuels, for example, low carbon ammonia? So is there anyone that wants to answer that one?
I can take this one.
Yeah, go ahead, Nicholas.
So in general, from a cost structure, green ammonia is expected to be 3 times to 5 times more expensive than today's bunker fuel that we use today, our fossil fuel base. Now, in terms of, so definitely, even if the cost curve were to go down, it is rather unlikely, apologies, it is rather unlikely for the price to go beyond or even equivalent to fossil fuel. So in general, so just from that, putting that into context, it's definitely going to be more expensive. Now, customers, are they willing to pay for it? Now, so far, I think if it's a completely standard in the industry to shift to a more expensive green ammonia or any green fuels for that matter, it's rather difficult to say whether everyone is willing to pay. I think the current sentiment is that based on what Maersk has been offering in the form of eco-delivery, which is currently we are using carbon zero biofuels. So far, customers are willing to pay a premium for those. And now, a big caveat here, of course, it's only made up of very small percentage of the customer supply chain. And in terms of customer profile, they're typically your large Western customers, so like Nike, Adidas, etc. Now, whether the same principle apply to the wider market, especially for small and medium enterprises, which are typically more reluctant, more price sensitive in that sense. That is still not tested market. Now, however, I think is a useful factor to take into account. And just recapping of just the past few years will be the low sulfur fuel, which IMO has mandated as mandatory. Now, back then, before the ratification of this regulation, everyone was reluctant, especially the smaller players, even both the smaller maritime as well as the smaller customers. However, one is become regulation in the form of lobbying and then greater support for decarbonization, as everyone, both political and private entities, realize that transitioning towards green energies is essential for us to keep the earth is hospitable. That might just be a political momentum and going to drive that as mandatory. But at this point in time, whether everyone is going to willing to pay a premium, the question is most likely no. But a minority would still be definitely willing to pay for it, and that can be a pathway for us to transition towards this, and then really trying to understand what is the market appetite, etc.
Thanks, Nicholas. Maybe, yeah, Natalie, I just wanted to ask, do you agree?
So allow me to just touch upon the earlier questions about the partnerships and the ports, because I found those really interesting. And I just wanted to say on the partnership side, one of the things that is making it difficult is that players like Yara are taking an integrated approach, partly because they see an opportunity. So there's a business opportunity here, but part of it is that we want to develop the market. And in absence of players ready to invest in those segments, we are going in. The problem that we're facing is that a lot of different players are doing exactly the same thing. And therefore, when we are looking for partners, we are looking for partners that complement us, but we take an integrated approach, our potential partners take an integrated approach, and therefore, are we really complementing each other? Are we really competitors? So this is one of the things that we are seeing now. And I think the market is very, very early days. So different companies will then settle into their segment, but we're not there yet. So that is something that is interesting to see. Big oil majors are an example, but by no means just them. On the Port Authority side, I just wanted to point out, it's a really interesting question that you raised there, because before joining Yara, I worked a lot in Africa and then in West Africa. And in that context, the minute a Port Authority tries to seek out a revenue stream by working in the private sector space, problems emerge, because of course port authorities need to be creating a level playing field, and they should not be in a position of preferring certain solutions over others. Now, how this is going to play out in the alternative transition energy phase, that is very interesting, because there might be an issue there with respect to being a regulator versus being an operator versus making developing business lines that do not traditionally belong to a landlord type of setup, which is, you know, the established setup in a lot of ports. To the price issue, I would argue that there is green fuels will be more expensive in the short term, and short to medium term potentially. That is not going to be the case in the longer term. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is the type of transactions that are taking place with conventional fuel is not going to be the one that is replicated for green fuels. For green fuels, at least in the early phases, we will be looking at long-term contracts, because us as producers and as suppliers, we need the confidence that you will be purchasing ammonia for your ships for at least X amount of years. And therefore, we need to keep that in mind. The price and the volume and the time scale, they're all inextricably linked. You have to look at the price in the context of the commercial contract that we will be seeking to establish with buyers of the fuel. And based on the studies we have done and others have done, I don't think it's going to have a massive impact on day-to-day consumers in the context of them going to the supermarket and buying the commodities that they need to buy. But that said, I think our earlier speaker from MOL did point out there's so many macroeconomic situations and dynamics happening. I don't think we can understand this in isolation. We have to look at it in the context of what is happening right now in terms of inflation and all other type of setups, because this is a more complex analysis to do than just looking at the direct link between increased bunker fuel costs and consumer costs.
Thanks a lot, Natalie. Because I assume that a lot of people counted on 15 past, I'm gonna go to the wrap up, but not before I want to give you the opportunity to share, preferably in 1 or 2 sentences, what you take away from this panel. Did you learn something new? What really stood out for you in the discussion? And I wanted to start with Imran to give you the opportunity to share your takeaway from this session.
Yeah, I think we've heard a few times the word collaboration here as key, in determining the uptake of alternative fuels. And actually, it has also been echoed by the Maritime CEO, our Maritime CEO here, that the true future fuel is collaboration instead of a traditional narrative of a multi-fuel, future that we will see. So yeah, I mean, collaboration is key. I mean, the work that we are pursuing here in Singapore involves about 21 study partners from the fuel producer Yara to the fuel storage terminal operators, bunker supplier barge operators, regulators. And I guess going back to the point again to Natalie, it's a mixture of both competitors and collaborators. So yeah, DNV as a facilitator would have a tough time to juggle and balance the requirements or the needs from the different participants here. But that's what we do in a joint industrial project approach. So I'm happy to share a bit more perhaps in a different context, but yeah, this is what we do here in Singapore. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks a lot, Imran. Nicholas, could I give you the floor for, well, probably a little bit less sentences than Imran, but you can take a few.
Yeah, so to me, one thing that feel me a bit more optimistic in Asia Pacific is that there's a clear realization that collaboration is indeed really the key. Now, technology pathway, etc., those are indeed only can become clearer as we start speaking to each other, and as well as having clarity in those conversations. I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Jan, could you please share your takeaways of today?
Sure. Same with the rest of the panelists. Collaboration, especially collaboration across the value chain and also across public-private sectors. I think it's important collaboration will be needed in order to overcome the various different complex issues and challenges, both from the technical and the commercial angle. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Sakura, could I give you the floor?
Thank you. So this is really a diversified panel. It was my pleasure to hear so many different opinions from different angles. And each and every one has a very good point of view, and I feel really fruitful for today. What takeaway? I guess the discussion itself, that we are here and talk about this issue itself, it's the biggest takeaway, not only for the panelists, but all the audience. Because in the beginning, I was mentioning the opportunity is also a challenge. So we have to really put the challenge or opportunity in our mind, in our word, and in our actions, So this is a really good opportunity that we're here to put these things in our mind and words. And I think every one of us has been taking some actions, and going forward from today, from tomorrow, maybe we will take more actions to make it happen. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Natalie, famous last words.
Thank you very much. And I'm even more energized and enthusiastic to work in the Asia region. And I think we'll have very good discussions going forward. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And maybe my takeaway, I'm very happy that I had got the opportunity to join this session and join the panel. And I think that indeed the diverse panel that we had here was very interesting to see how much discussion that can bring up. And I really hope that we can also take that out of a webinar into the boardrooms and have those discussions to bring forward and accelerate the setup of these new value chains, because it is a challenge. We need collaboration, it's been mentioned before. And but I think we can do it. I'm really, I share the energy that Natalie just mentioned. So thanks a lot for your contributions. And I'm going to give the floor back to Cheryl to close up for today.
Well, thank you for all. The discussion was very comprehensive and informative. And especially, I would like to thank you to Ellen, and your moderation is very fabulous. Well,
thank you.
And time flies and our event has come to an end. I am grateful to all the guest speakers for your generous sharing today, and to our audience for your company. And I hope that we all gain something from the event. And if you can't get enough, come and visit us offline in Singapore in September, where more global hydrogen value chain related topics will be waiting for you there. And a great diverse participations has already confirmed their participation. It's Childa from Japan, Adani from India, Angie from France, BP from UK, and Woodside Energy from Australia, and Nambia Investment and Development Board will also travel all the way from Africa. And also, I hope we have the opportunity to see all of our guest speakers today in Singapore in September. And thank you again for your company, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.